"Ma'am, this is a military aircraft, not public transit," the captain scoffed, blocking the jet's entry ramp. The woman he dismissed? Sarah Mitchell. Grey-streaked hair, mop in hand, invisible to most. But when a grizzled colonel saw her, he froze. "Mitchell," he whispered. Then, without a word, he saluted. The air stilled. Every soldier watching knew something had just shifted. They didn't know that beneath that janitor's uniform was a war hero, erased by time, and someone just reactivated her story. The helicopter blades cut through the morning air with a distinctive whomp 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 that makes her flinch, though she masks it instantly by bending to wring out her mop with deliberate focus. Her knowledge of the facility surpasses that of instructors who've been stationed here for a decade, every shortcut and service corridor mapped in her mind with military precision, yet she only uses the service entrances, arriving and departing like a ghost who cleans. In the 3 years since she started this job, her personnel file has remained remarkably thin, listing only S. Mitchell, custodial services, with no emergency contacts, no previous employment history that anyone bothers to verify. She'd applied through a third-party contractor that never questioned the gaps in her resume, or the fact that her social security number had only been active for 5 years. A new identity purchased from shadows after her official death. Clean enough to pass civilian background checks that never cross-reference with military databases. She takes her meals alone in the maintenance closet, a small sandwich and black coffee consumed in silence, while others gather in the staff break room to share stories and complaints. Every staff social event invitation goes politely declined, every attempt at friendly conversation redirected to the work at hand. If you were denied entry somewhere you belonged, would you fight back or walk away? Let me know where you're watching from. A young recruit struggles with disassembling his weapon during morning drills, his fingers fumbling with the components as his squad leader's voice rises in frustration. The recruit, glancing desperately around for help, catches her movement through the glass and mirrors her hand position, the weapon coming apart smoothly in his grip. His squad leader nods approval, never knowing a janitor just prevented another training failure. Captain Derek Morrison passes her in the hallway during his morning rounds, his expression carrying an unusual weight of disgust that goes beyond simple military hierarchy, looking down on civilian staff. His left hand unconsciously moves to his ribs where shrapnel scars hide beneath his uniform, the same fragments she'd shielded him from with her own body 20 years ago. Sarah yields the path to him immediately, pressing herself against the wall with something haunted flickering in her downcast eyes. A deference that seems to satisfy whatever drives the peculiar animosity in his gaze. The morning routine shatters at 0900 hours when sirens pierce the air, their urgent wail announcing a training accident that requires immediate medical evacuation. A young private has fallen from the rappelling tower, his body twisted at angles that make even seasoned instructors blanch. All available personnel receive orders to assist with loading the injured soldier onto the military transport jet, the kind of emergency that strips away protocol in favor of preserving life. Sarah's hands move without conscious thought, grabbing medical supplies from the nearest station, her body responding to an instinct buried beneath 3 years of deliberate suppression. She moves toward the aircraft with purpose, no longer the invisible janitor, but something else, something that Captain Morrison recognizes with a mixture of fear and rage, as he plants himself directly in her path. His hand trembles slightly as he raises it to block her, not from anger, but from something deeper, something that makes his voice crack when he speaks with forced authority that barely masks an emotion he can't name. "This is military personnel only," Morrison declares, his words carrying the weight of more than simple protocol. Cleaning staff waits outside. Sarah's voice emerges quiet but urgent, her eyes fixed on the medical supplies rather than his face. The soldier needs... The word warriors catches in his throat, a peculiar emotion threading through the syllables as his free hand unconsciously grips something in his pocket, the outline of a worn photograph visible through the fabric. The gathered personnel shift uncomfortably at the public humiliation, some looking away while others watch with the morbid fascination of those witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Morrison's voice rises to ensure everyone hears his next words, though they seem aimed at himself as much as her. Some people think proximity to heroes makes them one. Some people need reminding of their place. His white knuckles betray the calm authority he tries to project, the photograph in his pocket crumpling under the pressure of his grip. General James Crawford arrives for his scheduled inspection at precisely the wrong moment, his weathered face taking in the scene at the aircraft with the practiced assessment of a career military officer. Morrison straightens to attention, eager to explain his enforcement of security protocol to the base commander, his forced bravado increasing in direct proportion to the general's proximity. But Crawford's attention fixes on the woman trying to quietly retreat from the confrontation, his eyes catching the way her oversized collar shifts to reveal a scar along her neck, a distinctive mark that drains the color from his face faster than blood loss. "Master Sergeant Reeves," the general breathes, the name falling from his lips like a prayer for the dead. That's impossible. She died in Fallujah." The medical supplies slipped from Sarah's frozen hands, clattering against the tarmac as her fingers unconsciously moved to pull her utility jacket tighter, a futile attempt to hide from recognition that has already occurred. General Crawford's voice cracks with the weight of memory, each word pulled from a place he's kept locked for 20 years. November 9th, 2004. Operation Phantom Fury. The date hangs in the air like smoke from a battlefield that never truly cleared. While Morrison stands confused, his earlier authority evaporating into bewilderment. "Sir, this is just maintenance staff," he insists, but his hand moves unconsciously to his chest, where dog tags rest beneath his uniform, a gesture that betrays knowledge his conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. The general approaches Sarah slowly, as if moving too quickly might shatter the impossibility of her presence, his eyes never leaving the scar that tells a story written in blood and sacrifice. "You saved my unit. 13 men. We counted them every year on the anniversary, every name, every face." Sarah's eyes close against the weight of recognition, her voice emerging as barely more than a whisper. "That person is gone, General. She died that day, just like the records say." The past crashes into the present with the force of an IED explosion, memory and reality blurring as Sarah's mind unwillingly returns to that day in Fallujah. She sees Corporal Martinez again, 22 years old, with a wallet full of baby photos, his blood mixing with sand as she holds his head in her lap. "Tell her Daddy tried to come home," he begs through lips already turning blue, and Sarah's younger self makes a promise she knows is a lie. "You'll tell her yourself, Martinez, you're going home." She drags him through fire that eats at her own flesh, her uniform smoking as she refuses to let go, refuses to leave him behind, even as his tears mix with blood and he whispers the truth they both know. "I can't feel my legs." Sarah's response comes automatic, practiced from too many similar moments. "You're fine, just shock. Keep talking to me about your little girl." But she knows he's paralyzed, knows the shrapnel has severed what medical science can't repair, knows she's dragging a dead man who hasn't stopped breathing yet. Young Morrison appears in her memory next, barely 19 and crying for his mother as bullets crack overhead, his terror absolute and primal. The RPG explosion that should have killed him instead catches Sarah as she throws herself between him and the blast, her back taking shrapnel meant for his chest. "My mother's name is Grace," he babbles through shock as she drags him, his blood mixing with hers. "She makes apple pie every Sunday. Please don't let me die before I taste her pie again." Sarah's voice stays steady despite the metal burning in her flesh. "You'll have 2 slices next Sunday, Morrison, with vanilla ice cream." Sarah finds herself singing, her voice somehow steady despite the chaos, offering the same lullaby her own mother sang to her brother before cancer took him. Sleep now, brave boy. Morning will come. The words emerging between controlled breaths as she low crawls through the kill zone with Morrison's weight on her back. Don't leave me. His terrified grip on her vest threatens to strangle them both, fingers locked in a death grip that speaks of terror beyond his years. Never, she whispers back, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Warriors don't abandon warriors. The sniper's bullet that grazes her neck comes almost as an afterthought, adding another line to the map of scars she's collecting, like testimonials to other people's survival. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked? Share your story below. The truth of Sarah's survival emerges in fragments, each piece more improbable than the last. Official military records list Master Sergeant Rebecca Reeves as killed in action, her body presumed lost in the hospital bombing that followed the rescue. The blast had destroyed the field hospital's record systems, incinerating patient files and the laptop containing the casualty list updates, her status forever frozen at KIA while she lay unconscious in an overflow ward. The reality proves both simpler and more complex, found unconscious by Iraqi civilians who didn't care about dog tags or nationality, only that a woman needed help. She spent months in an overflow civilian hospital, her facial injuries and trauma rendering her unrecognizable even to herself when she finally looked in a mirror. The military counted bodies at the bombing site, assumed hers among the ash and debris, closed her file with full honors and a folded flag sent to parents who'd already lost one child to war. Sarah woke with partial amnesia, remembering only fragments and the name Sarah from somewhere deep in her scrambled memories. By the time her full recollection returned, she'd already been dead for 6 months, her unit buried, her war over. And she made the choice that would define the next 20 years. Heroes are buried at Arlington, Sarah says now, her voice steady despite the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I just clean floors. The survivor's guilt weighs heavier than any equipment she ever carried, manifesting in dreams where Martinez asks about his daughter, where dying men seek promises she couldn't keep, where 13 lived because 37 died. PTSD made her fear the responsibility that would come with recognition, the expectation to be something more than broken pieces held together by routine and purpose. She found peace in anonymous service, in ensuring training facilities stayed clean for the next generation of soldiers who would never know their janitor once pulled their predecessors from hell. The families had found closure in her death, she reasoned, had grieved and moved on with folded flags and medals that meant their loved one died for something. Why disturb that peace with the messy reality of a survivor who couldn't explain why she lived when better soldiers died? The scar on her neck tells its own story to those who know how to read such things. Shrapnel from an RPG that targeted Crawford's radio men. A piece of metal that should have severed her carotid, but somehow missed by millimeters. She refused evacuation until all 13 men were secured, until the last of them was loaded onto the medevac that she should have been on. 13 alive, squad dead, fair trade, were her last coherent thoughts before collapse claimed her, the mathematics of survival reducing to simple arithmetic in a mind shutting down from blood loss and exhaustion. Field medics later said she died twice on their table, her heart stopping as if even her body understood the debt that needed paying. The last man she saved, the youngest who cried for his mother, was Private First Class Derek Morrison, though neither of them would acknowledge this connection for 20 years. Morrison's reversal comes not gradually but all at once, like a dam breaking under pressure it was never designed to withstand. The general orders him to attention, beginning to recite Sarah's classified record of valor in detail that speaks of briefings repeated until memorized. This woman has more confirmed saves than your entire career, Captain. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts. But Morrison's breakdown interrupts the litany. his composure shattering as he pulls out a worn photograph with shaking hands. "I know," he gasps between sobs, "that 20 years of military bearing can't suppress. I've always known." The photograph shows a 19-year-old version of himself being carried from hell by a woman whose face is obscured by blood and smoke, but whose determination is evident in every line of her body. I recognized her walk 3 years ago. The way she favors her left side from the shrapnel still embedded there. The way she unconsciously hums that lullaby when she thinks no one's listening. The same tune that kept me conscious through 6 hours of hell. His confession pours out like blood from a wound finally allowed to bleed. 3 years of hatred. 3 years of spite. I told myself she was dead, that this was just someone who looked similar. I ran her prints through civilian databases, confirmed she was Sarah Mitchell, convinced myself I was paranoid. But I knew. God help me, I knew from the first day. Morrison's legs buckle, not from military protocol, but from the crushing weight of dishonor that threatens to break him completely. The internal monologue he's suppressed surfaces in broken fragments between sobs. She gave everything. I gave insults. The memory of her blood dripping on his face as she carried him through fire burns fresher than any physical scar. What kind of man repays life with shame? The question hangs unanswered, because everyone present knows the answer stands before them in a captain's uniform, reduced to his knees by the magnitude of his own failure. "You sang to me," he continues, his voice breaking completely, "like I was worth saving, like my life mattered more than yours." The gathered soldiers watch in stunned silence as their superior officer breaks down before a janitor, the rigid hierarchy of military life crumbling in the face of a debt that transcends rank. "I became an officer to honor her sacrifice," Morrison continues, each word an admission that costs him another piece of the facade he's maintained. Every promotion, every commendation, I told myself it was for her, to make her death mean something. His voice drops to barely audible levels. "When I saw her alive, cleaning toilets while I wore the rank her sacrifice earned me, I felt like a fraud. Every insult was hatred for my own cowardice, for surviving when she should have died. I kept her secret because I thought I was protecting her, but I was protecting myself from the truth that I'd become everything she saved me from becoming, a coward who puts pride before honor." The photograph trembles in his grip, 20 years of careful preservation evident in its worn edges. I used her memory for advancement, while she chose anonymity. That lullaby she sang, I sing it to my daughter now. Tell her it's from a hero who saved Daddy. The complete breakdown of a decorated officer before enlisted personnel and civilians should scandalize, but instead creates a moment of profound silence as truth fills the space between them. The twist comes from an unexpected source. A young female recruit named Private Emma Reeves steps forward from the gathering crowd, her face pale with recognition. "Aunt Rebecca?" she whispers, and the entire assembly freezes. Sarah's eyes widen in shock as she sees her brother's daughter in uniform, the niece who was told her aunt died a hero in Iraq when she was just 3 years old. "Mum said you were killed in action. We visit your grave every Memorial Day." The revelation that Sarah has been cleaning the very base where her own niece trains adds another layer of complexity to her hidden identity. General Crawford calls an impromptu formation, his voice carrying the authority of someone who understands the weight of this moment. One by one he lists Sarah's commendations from memory, each medal and action report memorized like scripture. The gathered soldiers gradually piece together the identity of the woman they've passed in hallways for 3 years, the legendary ghost of Fallujah who existed more in myth than confirmed fact. Stories they'd heard in basic training, whispered accounts of a sergeant who refused to leave anyone behind, who dragged men twice her size through enemy fire while singing lullabies to keep them conscious. The recognition spreads through the ranks like wildfire, and without any order given, They begin to salute. First one, then another, until every uniformed present stands at attention, rendering honors to a woman in a janitor's uniform who outranks them all in the currency that matters. Sarah's response comes quiet but firm, a voice that once commanded men in battle, now asking for something harder than courage under fire. I'm just Sarah Mitchell now. That other person, she completed her mission. She turns to Morrison, still on his knees with tears streaming down his face, and offers the absolution he doesn't deserve but desperately needs. You lived. You have a daughter. That's all I ask. Her weathered hand reaches out, not to help him up, but to touch the photograph he clutches like a lifeline. Sing her the song. Tell her it's from someone who knew her daddy was worth saving. That's your honor now. The simplicity of her forgiveness breaks something in Morrison that his self-hatred couldn't touch, and he nods through tears, understanding finally that survival itself carries obligations heavier than any rank. She turns to her niece, tears finally breaking through her composure. Your mother needed to grieve a hero, not nurse a broken soldier. Sometimes the dead serve the living better by staying dead. Sarah refuses the general's offer to reinstate her rank and records her reasoning as simple as it is profound. My war ended that day, General. Let me serve this way. She gestures to the training facility around them, to the young soldiers who will never know their janitor once walked their path. The best leaders teach without speaking. Every floor I clean, every facility I maintain ensures they train safely. That's my mission now. Her request for continued anonymity comes not from shame, but from understanding that sometimes the greatest service happens in shadows. Those boys I saved, they lived full lives, had families. That's the victory, not medals or recognition, but grandchildren who exist because 13 men came home. The general accepts her decision with the respect of someone who understands that true service takes many forms. Morrison's self-imposed consequences reflect a man trying to balance scales that can never be even. He transfers himself to the most remote posting available, a weather station in Alaska, where he'll have years to contemplate the weight of survival. His apology letter, left on Sarah's cleaning cart, contains no excuses or justifications. I dishonored what you protected, it reads simply. Every cruel word was a betrayal of the life you gave me. I kept your secret with silence when I should have kept it with respect. A month's pay donated to a veterans fund in her name attempts to put monetary value on what has none, but it's the final items that carry the most weight. The photograph he's carried for 20 years finally returned to her, and a recording of the lullaby she sang to him in Fallujah. So you remember the words, his note explains, though they both know she never forgot. 6 months later, the rhythm of Sarah's life appears unchanged on the surface. She still arrives at 0500 hours, still cleans with meticulous precision, still wears the same oversized utility jacket that hides her frame and her history. Private Emma Reeves has become her quiet shadow, arriving early to help with cleaning duties that aren't part of her official schedule. The two women working in companionable silence that speaks of blood, understanding blood. But something fundamental has shifted in the atmosphere around her. Young recruits perform better, though they can't explain why. Training injuries decrease by 40%, a statistic that puzzles administrators who don't notice how certain equipment gets mysteriously adjusted overnight, how safety protocols appear reinforced in ways too subtle to document. Nobody questions the civilian custodian who seems to know too much about combat medicine, who leaves anonymous notes for struggling recruits that somehow contain exactly what they need to hear. A female recruit wrestling with self-doubt finds a message tucked into her gear. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's continuing when fear tells you to stop. The next day, she breaks the base running record, never knowing her inspiration came from a janitor who once refused to stop when everything told her to. What sacrifices deserve recognition in your community? Honor them in the comments. General Crawford establishes a new routine, arriving monthly with 2 cups of coffee, sitting in companionable silence with Sarah as they watch the sunrise over the training grounds. They don't speak of Fallujah, or the men who didn't come home, finding communication in shared understanding that transcends words. He leaves flowers at the memorial wall, where her lost squad's names are etched in black granite. 37 lives traded for 13, in arithmetic that never balances. Sarah adds a 13th flower for the woman she used to be, acknowledging that Master Sergeant Rebecca Reeves died that day in truth, if not in fact. A 14th flower appears monthly without explanation until someone notices it. Arrives via standing order from an Alaska weather station, paid for by Captain Morrison, who understands that some debts require eternal payment. The new recruits cycle through with the regularity of seasons, each class bringing fresh faces who know nothing of the woman who ensures their training environment remains pristine. A particularly cocky private makes the mistake of mocking the old cleaning lady within earshot of veteran soldiers, his laughter dying as he notices the sudden stillness that follows his words. The silence that descends carries more weight than any shouted reprimand, heavy with unspoken knowledge that passes between those who've learned to look closer. One veteran leans in close, his whisper carrying the gravity of passed-down wisdom. "Show respect. You never know who's watching your six." The private's confusion at the cryptic warning fades as he watches the other soldiers' deference to the janitor, the way they step aside in hallways not from obligation, but from something deeper. Sarah continues mopping, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she works, her shadow cast by the morning sun forming the unmistakable silhouette of a soldier at attention, hand raised in eternal salute. The cleaning cart she pushes through hallways becomes a mobile command post for invisible leadership, stocked not just with supplies, but with purpose. Young soldiers struggling with homesickness find encouraging notes that somehow address their specific fears. A recruit whose hands shake during rifle assembly discovers detailed diagrams sketched on napkins, left where only he will find them. The mess hall experiences a mysterious decrease in food poisoning incidents after Sarah quietly reports refrigeration issues no one else noticed. Her presence becomes a constant in the shifting landscape of military training, a fixed point that anchors something essential but unnameable. The officer who once tried to bar her from an aircraft now serves at a remote outpost where Aurora Borealis dances across winter skies, each green wave reminding him of the utility jacket she wore while saving his life. In quiet moments between duties, Sarah sometimes touches the scar on her neck, feeling the raised tissue that maps a moment when everything changed. The shrapnel still embedded in her left side aches on rainy days, a weather forecast written in metal and memory. She's learned to find meaning in the mundane tasks that fill her days, understanding that every polished floor reflects more than light. It reflects a commitment to excellence that transcends job titles. The young soldiers who train on these grounds will go on to their own battles, their own moments of truth, and if her invisible presence helps even one of them come home, then her choice to remain Sarah Mitchell rather than reclaim Rebecca Reeves validates itself daily. The base chaplain notices her sometimes in the pre-dawn darkness, a solitary figure moving through empty corridors with purpose that suggests prayer in motion. He's offered counsel, sensing the weight she carries, but Sarah politely declines with the explanation that her reconciliation happened long ago on a blood-soaked street in Fallujah. Her theology reduced to simple arithmetic that day. 13 souls saved justified 37 lost, including her own. The families who received folded flags and posthumous medals found closure in their grief, built lives around absence that her resurrection would only complicate. Better to remain dead in official records while living in service, a ghost who cleans rather than haunts. The impact of her presence spreads in ripples too subtle for official documentation, but profound in aggregate effect. Drill instructors notice recruits displaying unusual awareness of safety protocols, implementing corrections before they're taught. The base hospital reports fewer training accidents requiring major intervention, though no policy changes explain the improvement. A culture of looking out for one another develops organically. Soldiers checking equipment with extra care, offering help before it's asked for, creating networks of support that mirror the ethos of leaving no one behind. They can't trace this shift to its source because its source moves through their world with mop and bucket, teaching through example rather than words. Sarah's small apartment off base reflects the same Spartan simplicity as her work life, furnished with only essentials and devoid of military memorabilia. The only decoration hangs in her bedroom where no visitor ever goes. Morrison's returned photograph, now framed, showing a younger version of herself carrying the future from a war zone. Next to it, a new addition, a photo Emma secretly took of the two of them working side by side, aunt and niece, united in service across generations of sacrifice. She studies it sometimes in the grey hour before dawn, remembering the woman who refused to let go, who sang lullabies over gunfire, who calculated survival in numbers that never quite balanced. That woman officially died in Fallujah, but something essential survived, transformed from warrior to guardian, from leader of soldiers to keeper of spaces where new warriors train. The conversation between her and General Crawford during his monthly visits often consists more of silence than words, two veterans sharing understanding that transcends language. Sometimes he updates her on the men she saved. Martinez survived to see his daughter graduate college. The others built families and careers on the foundation of continued existence her sacrifice provided. She never asks about Morrison directly, but Crawford mentions the Alaska posting, the exemplary service record that comes from a man trying to earn what was freely given. The general brings news of a military that's changed since their war, evolved in ways both promising and troubling, seeking her insights while respecting her choice to remain officially invisible. On the 20th anniversary of Fallujah, a strange phenomenon occurs at Fort Bragg. Flowers appear at the memorial wall in unprecedented numbers, not just from Gold Star families, but from men across the country who don't explain why they honor names on this particular date. 13 arrangements arrive, with cards bearing only first names and the phrase, "Still watching your six." Sarah observes from a distance. As families gather, some children now older than their parents were when they died, grandchildren who exist because someone refused to leave their grandfather behind. The arithmetic of war plays out in generations. 13 bloodlines, continued at the cost of 37 ended. A calculation that defines victory in terms no medal can capture. The janitor's shadow lengthens as afternoon fades to evening at Fort Bragg, stretching across training grounds where tomorrow's soldiers prepare for wars not yet declared. Sarah Mitchell finishes her rounds with the same precision she brought to combat operations, every task completed to standard no one requires but herself. In the base commander's office, General Crawford drafts efficiency reports that will never mention the civilian custodian, whose presence correlates with improved training outcomes, reduced injuries, and indefinable boost in morale. Somewhere in Alaska, Captain Morrison teaches survival skills to new officers, including lessons learned from a woman who showed him that living through war creates obligations heavier than dying in it. The base settles into night routine, secure in ways its occupants don't fully understand, guarded by someone who learned that the greatest victories often come disguised as ordinary service. Sarah locks the maintenance closet, hangs up her equipment, and walks to her car through shadows that salute her passing. Another day's mission complete in a war that never truly ends, but transforms into different kinds of duty. The ghost of Fallujah has become the guardian of Fort Bragg, and 13 men across the country sleep peacefully, their dreams untroubled by the arithmetic of survival, their janitor calculated in blood and devotion 20 years ago.